This podcast is recorded on the traditional and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people.
British Columbia, I've seen your mountains high, seen your pretty rainbows and your blue crystal skies, watched your winding rivers as they flow around the bend. To me you're not a stranger, you'll always be a friend.
Coming to you from the West Coast, this is Politicoast. Today is September 5th, 2019, and this is episode 154. Politicoast is a BC politics podcast. Tell us what you think by leaving a review or get at us on social media. And most importantly, help us build the show by throwing us a couple bucks a month at patreon.com/Politicoast. And a big thank you to all our longtime and new patrons for helping support the show and keeping us going during Ian's paternity leave. I'm Scott de Lundeboom.
And I'm today's designated Ian, Stewart Prest.
Welcome back, Stewart.
Good to be here.
On today's show, are British Columbians getting gouged at the pump? And what's up with the NDP's and the Green Party's troubles? Politicoast is in partnership with BC Today, British Columbia's daily newsletter dedicated exclusively to BC politics. Sign up for a free trial to have unique coverage of the BC legislature delivered to your inbox every morning. Listeners to Politicoast, enter offer code CITIZEN, all lowercase, for access to a special rate. For your free 2-week trial of the newsletter, go to britishcolumbiatoday.ca. Let's jump into our first segment, the gas price inquiry.
Yeah, we have some answers, and turns out we have some new questions about what is happening with gas prices in BC, the notoriously high gas prices in the Lower Mainland.
So back in the spring, the BC government put the question to the Utility Commission, why are gas prices so high? People may remember that during the spring, early summer, gas prices hit record levels. There was widespread outrage. Everyone used it as their chance to, bang the stick on why we need pipelines or whatever. And, well, just this past week, actually right after we recorded last week, the Utility Commission came back with their findings.
Right. And so now we know that there are some variety of factors that seem to play into an expectation of some higher gas prices. There is a presence of some aspects of a natural monopoly, which can make prices a little higher. There seems like there might be some limitations in terms of the overall refinery capacity for the region. And then there is also a sort of mystery 13-cent gap between where the Lower Mainland is and the rest of Canada, which the inquiry couldn't explain either. So we still don't fully have our answer.
Yeah, that 13 cents was really kind of the highlight takeaway from this. So the Utility Commission compared prices between Metro Vancouver and the Pacific Northwest and found that after they counted for everything, there's still this weird 13-cent gap.
The big shrug emoji beside it. It is strange. I mean, it could be perception. There's some sense that it could be choreographed pricing as opposed to straight up cartel behavior. So you can spot the difference between those kinds of activities. One is more, I think, follow the leader kind of activity where you have a single large actor or a small set of large actors setting a price and the others kind of go along with it. And then there can be more direct collusions. And it seems like it's possible we are seeing evidence of the former, not the latter.
Yeah, so the commission looked specifically for if they could find any collusion behavior, and they couldn't. Particularly at the retail level, they found no indications that there was any collusion, and in fact, it looks largely like it is a competitive market for retailers. But where it isn't competitive is the wholesalers, which is also where the 13 cents oddly comes from, or maybe not so oddly. So there are 4 companies that control basically all of the market, that 90%. That they'd be Parkland, which owns the Parkland refinery here in Burnaby, Suncor, Imperial Oil, and Shell. And because of this, it's effectively an oligopoly and can't even be considered a natural monopoly. So there's basically no way for anyone to enter the market to compete with these big 4 companies.
Right. And when you have a certain set amount of refining capacity, when that's tapped out, it is extremely high barrier entry market. So that seems like it can create the conditions where prices are going to pop now and then. And so we just have this extra pop in there. But that is sort of the fact And then we have this question about what to do about it.
Yeah, let's jump into that. But one of the things that touches on, though, is that the refining capacity in the region is pretty much at capacity. So none of these big wholesalers actually have really any incentive to cut their prices because they actually just can't really increase their volume at all. And the report also found that if the Trans Mountain Pipeline went away, we wouldn't actually be able to replace all of that with the other existing infrastructure. So that does leave us kind of in a tight spot. But that, I guess, brings us to the question of, well, now what? They said that maybe additional refining capacity might be one of those things that could lower prices. But at the same time, it seems to kind of go against a lot of the other goals of the government.
Mm-hmm. And so we can't just create new supply as well. So just building more pipelines isn't going to solve this problem. It is a problem of this bottleneck at the refinery level, and that's a major investment to build new refining capacity, whether it's private or public or a mix of the two through some kind of partnership. It's investing significant new money into what the province has repeatedly under different governments has committed to be a declining source of energy over time. We are looking to transition the province's fleet towards more renewable energy-driven vehicles, and so to do that at the same time you're building new refinery capacity is going to be very difficult to make a business case for that.
Yeah, that also kind of touches on, it's not politically popular to say, but it does kind of help those long-term goals if gas prices stay high, much the same way a carbon tax also incentivizes people to trade in their SUVs for EVs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, hell, I'll say it. I'm not running for office. It is actually great if your goal is to get people to think seriously about the choices they're making. That's what the carbon tax is supposed to do. It's supposed to give people an additional incentive to think about making other choices with their consumption habits. So the next time they go to buy a vehicle, if they think prices may remain high, that's going to factor into the decision. They may look to buy a smaller vehicle. They may look at ways to introduce other modes of transportation, whether it's bike, whether it's e-scooters, whether it's car-to-go, whether it's transit, whether it's walking, some combination of all these different things to get from point A to point B. When you have an expectation, that prices are going to stay high, you're going to make those choices a little differently. So this, from a consumer standpoint, it's not a great thing. Right? We all want things cheaper. But from transforming the British Columbia economy standpoint, it's part of a larger process. And it becomes less uncomfortable the more people look to make different choices. So people who are finding ways to bike to work or take transit to work more often, it's obviously not possible for everyone, but there are people who can make those changes. And when they make those changes, they're not feeling this price adjustment nearly as much.
So I guess that brings us to the next question of, well, what should all the parties do from it? How have the government and the opposition reacted?
Well, the government looks like they're hedging their bets a little bit. They are, one of the possibilities here is you could legislate pricing around fuel. You could put a minimum and a maximum price on, say, wholesale fuel prices, but that is something the government has previously shied away from, and they don't seem super keen on doing it now, and there are good economic reasons to try to avoid those kinds of outcomes. Whenever you put a price floor or a price ceiling on a commodity, then some other mechanism is going to control the supply. So, and that may be a reduction of the overall supply of the commodity, and maybe that we see different behavior on the part of market participants. So you can imagine you can put a ceiling on the wholesale price. That's going to change incentives for everyone participating in the market. So they may want to avoid that kind of behavior to avoid any kind of market distortions as a result.
Yeah, and one of the classic market distortions when you put a price cap on stuff is shortages. So right now, I mean, people might not like the price they're paying, but they can always get gas if they show up at any gas station. So if the regulations don't calibrate it right, you can definitely hit a point where there just isn't gas to go around. Right.
If you actually cap the price below the level that the market participants would be willing to sell at, they will cease to participate in your market. And then you're not regulating that exchange through the market. It's queuing. It's lining up. It's first come, first serve, and that's something we haven't seen with gas prices really since the the 70s. I don't think anyone wants to go back to those old black and white photos of people waiting outside gas stations looking for the gas. That's kind of a worst case scenario. I don't think we're anywhere near there, and the government doesn't want to take its first step towards that outcome. So it doesn't seem like that is a possibility. But then what are you left with? That supply increase, supporting refinery capacity building?
Well, that's kind of what the Liberals hit on big, is they want to use this as an opportunity to make the case to build the pipeline, even though it really didn't actually support that.
Right. So the report does tend to burst a couple of bubbles here, and you can make a case for the pipeline, but solving high BC gas prices doesn't seem to be part of that case.
Mm-hmm. And their other big criticism of this is what it didn't look at, specifically the terms of reference excluded the Utility Commission from examining the taxes that get placed on gasoline.
And, I mean, it's understandable why the government may not want to have an external body examining the tax burden. For one thing, that's not a mystery. We know what the taxes are. We know why they're there. We know what they're going to. And
it's also very transparent. Like at all the gas stations I know that if there's a little sticker that says, how much of your liter of gasoline, how much of the price goes to what tax.
Right. And as soon as you start quibbling with those taxes, you're quibbling with a use of that money. So a portion of those taxes goes to fund transit in the Lower Mainland. A portion goes to maintain the province's highways. It's very much earmarked. A small portion of that total tax burden is a carbon tax, which is designed to incentivize different choices. And as we just discussed, when prices are high, that's just that process playing itself out. So there's not really a lot there you could easily pull out without saying, well, you're going to have to pay for your highways from a different source, or you're going to have to find a different source, say general revenues, to pay for transit upgrades. So I can understand why the government didn't want that included. It really muddies the water.
Yeah, I think the TransLink tax has been talked about as one thing that would potentially be, that's for the Lower Mainland only. And that's only, as far as I can recall, being in the context of, well, if we want to put in congestion pricing, maybe we should get rid of the transit tax as a kind of balance things out, not make the drivers too angry.
Right. Well, I mean, if you were replacing the revenue with another purpose-built stream of revenue, say congestion pricing, then yeah, I think what you don't want to do is to decouple those conversations where you have unfunded transit, because congestion pricing or no, congestion would increase. The more you can build out your transit network, the more you can solve the congestion issue, and the more you can solve the much larger climate issue.
Moving on to our second segment, No Decent Prospects. The NDP has been having troubles and a very interesting week, particularly out in the Atlantic provinces. So to start this off, last week it was revealed that the NDP is actually lagging all the other parties in nominating candidates. They've only gotten, as of a week ago, 175 of the 338. In the meantime, the Conservatives have nominated almost all their candidates. Same with the People's Party. Like, who would have expected they'd be leading the NDP and getting their organization built up?
I think there's a trade-off there in terms of speed and scrutiny, which we can get into a little bit. But yeah, they are certainly behind the pace, and they are sufficiently behind the pace that we've been hearing, not just with this Atlantic story, we've been hearing from other parties to the NDP, a movement that all has not been smooth sailing in getting the logistics of this campaign up and running.
Yeah, they've also had fundraising troubles. There was talk at one point of whether or not they'd forgo the campaign plane charter that is typical for a major party and just spend like a week in one place bussing around. The NDP recently kind of tried to quash that story, saying no, they're actually going to do it, but as we might get to a little later, their budget numbers are not looking great.
Right. They have had trouble raising funds. They have debt overhang.
They started the year with quite a large negative asset balance of, I think, $4.5 million, with $9 million of being in liabilities.
Yeah. And so that is not an ideal place to start a new campaign, a fresh campaign. And if you are making commitments to take on new debt to finance a campaign jet, this suddenly starts to look at like you're throwing good money after bad. If the party cannot, at a certain point, parties like businesses like governments, have to find a way to balance out their expenses and their income. And so this has been an issue that's been percolating for the federal party for a few years now, and it seems like this election may be where that crunch really starts to be felt.
Well, one place charter jet can take you is New Brunswick. I mean, in theory. Not necessarily the case that it's been the case. So earlier this week, CBC posted a very interesting story on Tuesday that 14 New Brunswick New Democratic provincial candidates from the last election had decided they're going green.
Yeah. The story gets quite messy quite quickly because of the 14, 5 subsequently repudiated the story.
Yeah, that was today's breaking news. But let's kind of walk through the week as it unfolded here, just because it really lays the groundwork for how nuts the story's been.
Right. So, and it's been building from I don't know, crisis, scandal to scandal. Yeah.
It feels like it's been weeks.
Well, it's a soap opera, and if we wanted to sort of zoom out at some point to the larger view here, which is the Green Party, the NDP they are going after each other. This is not just two third parties happy to be there. These are two parties that they have a real fight on their hands, and they're really looking towards one another. But so we have these a letter announcing that 14 provincial former candidates, along with I believe the province's federal NDP executive,
Jonathan Richardson.
Right, were decamping en masse to the Green Party for fear of not being, first of all, not being heard, not being considered within the NDP architecture.
They weren't getting the support they needed to nominate candidates, and most interestingly of all, that in the nearly 2 years now that Jagmeet Singh has been leader of the NDP, he hasn't once visited New Brunswick.
Mm-hmm. And that, at once you can understand it, and at once see that it is a significant problem. The NDP is a party that has, a lot on its plate, and Jagmeet Singh, as a new leader, had a lot on his plate. So he needed to build out the machine of the party to transition from the Mulcair era to the Singh era. He needed to find a place to run, and then to actually run, he needed to try to get his caucus on side. And before he had a seat in Commons, that seemed like a real challenge. And he needed to try to shore up the party's fortunes in places like Quebec, where they have a lot at stake. Where in a place like New Brunswick, the stakes seem lower. The party's fortunes seem somewhat dimmer, and yet.
Yeah, historically they have not done particularly well. And these NDP candidates at the provincial level, none of them had won because the NDP didn't pick up a single seat in that past election. Meanwhile, the Greens grabbed 3. So this, the Greens are on the ascent. The local NDP are anything but ascending. Their leaders right now, I believe, a 21, 22-year-old. This is his 4th job, part-time job, which it's a challenge, but they had to cancel their leadership convention this August because they didn't have anyone who wanted to be leader. So you can see why at the provincial level, it's the party's thinking, maybe this isn't where we want to spend our efforts politically.
And when you are facing resource crunches, those are hard choices that you have to make. But with those hard choices then can come consequences. And so we're going to get into the muddiness in a second, but this is one of those consequences. When you're focusing your resources where they're most needed, you're not going to be able to project that confident aura of a national party as easily, and people are going to feel neglected, and with some justification.
Yeah, well, what's confusing to me is that it took Jagmeet Singh a long time to get his seat in Parliament, and that was because one of the main reasons he gave was he was going to be visiting the country, talking to people, building up the party. I think his website even had a little graphic of him traveling around the country in an animated plane. Like that whole year plus of him not being in Parliament but being the NDP leader was supposed to be visiting the country. So why is he missing? I mean, not a major province, but still it's not an insignificant place either. Like,
yeah. I mean,
what was he doing?
Well, yeah. Again, there's a symbolism here, right? So it's there are only 10 provinces, and a party that has national aspirations does have to pay some attention to all 10 of those provinces. And so I think even though it is not likely to show great returns for the NDP, just because it is not an area where they seem to have a lot of votes to capture.
Yeah, I
And
think their Atlantic prospects are a lot more concentrated in Nova Scotia.
Nova
particularly
Scotia,
the Halifax
the
region.
Halifax region seems like their point of particular strength in the maritime region. So, I mean, again, it's understandable why that wouldn't be the top priority for the party and for the new leader, and yet politics is so much about symbolism, and a visit like that is as much for the party machinery as it is for any appeals to voters directly. It's just showing the party faithful that they matter, to give them a little pep talk, to give them a bit of face time with the leader, and this group of people, or at least the subset of the group of people who actually end up defecting, felt like enough was enough.
Yeah, so CBC comes out with a story. It's almost immediately followed up by Elizabeth May welcoming them to the party. Maybe not entirely being clear on the provincial Green Party versus federal Green Party distinction. And, well, there isn't that distinction among the NDP, but it's still kind of blending provincial and federal politics quite a bit.
Well, there's some question about agency here, and so as the story has progressed, we've seen Ms. May start to distance herself a little bit. So speaking today on CTV, I heard her say, she was at pains to say, well, this is just some... this was an initiative that we had nothing to do with. If folks want to join our movement and share our values, that becomes important. They're welcome to do so. But she was at pains to say she was not. The Green Party was not an initiator here in any sense. And so I guess that matters for a couple of reasons.
One main one is that when asked why the NDP wasn't doing too well, Jonathan Richardson, the former executive at the federal level, said that race of the leader might be a factor there. And the NDP, of course, seized on that and spent the last day trumpeting that one quite a bit as, look at all these terrible people defecting because they can't put up with a Sikh leading their party, which struck me as a pretty weak argument. If these are 14 people that your party ran in the last election, then trying to disparage them as being bad kind of is a bit of an own goal there.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's possible. I mean, the NDP, they're looking for ways to lessen the blow here. I mean, remember, what we're seeing and what this case really lays bare is that our election now, our federal election, and the writ could come any day, it's basically kind of like a heavyweight match and an undercard. Right, so we have the Liberals and the Conservatives. They're going at each other, and they have shown no compunction on either side to go negative. The Greens and the NDP increasingly are seeing one another as direct threats to one another. On the Green Party has this aspiration of really taking a step forward this election, and the NDP are seeing the possibility that their claims to being the country's third party are being challenged. So it's a big deal for both parties, and so. I wouldn't be. It's not surprising that the NDP would try to find any kind of way to respond to this kind of news, and particularly to do so in a way that targets the Green Party directly and pretty pointedly.
Yeah, this originally was looked at as a pretty big blow to the NDP, having 14 people with significant ties to the party, ran for them in the past. Defecting. It looks like a big deal, and that was kind of the takeaway Tuesday on this, was that, oh wow, the NDP are really in trouble. Yeah. And just going to what you said about the kind of two tiers of the campaign, I've got the CBC poll tracker up in front of me. So their aggregated averages, the Liberal and the Conservatives are neck and neck, 0.4% apart. It's really anyone's game on that one. It's all about vote efficiencies in various ridings. The Greens and the NDP, the NDP in a little bit of a lead consistently, but statistically still tied. And we've even had the odd poll here and there where the Greens actually come out ahead of the NDP.
Yeah, so it's
a tight race there, and particularly in places like the South Island, where they've already been kind of the top two parties, and I think they're really feeling it now, that heat between them.
Yeah. So, right. It's a close race. It's remarkable. No party, either the heavyweight or the undercard bout, it seems like they're able to break away definitively yet. And we may not see. This may be one of those elections where it just goes down to the wire, or there might be a turning point where one or two of these parties really starts to capture momentum. We don't know. But right now, it's pretty close to a double dead heat, and it's a fascinating situation. But we're going to see some pointed moments like this. We're going to see the Green Party and the NDP trying not to appear to attack one another directly, but they're exchanging words.
And their surrogates definitely are. Some of the nastiest back and forth are between the Green Party supporters and New Democrats on the supporters level going at each other.
Oh, yeah. When you get into the Twitter meat grinder, you'll come across all kinds of sniping back and forth. But one of the things that this episode brings home is that we're not super great as a country talking about race in this election. We're still kind of struggling with it. And there are some parts of the country where it is genuinely not a big deal at all. It's like, why are we even talking about it? Then there's other parts of this country where it seems like some subset of voters and, by extension, politicians are a little bit unsure of this. And so that remains...
I lived in New Brunswick for 2 years, and I don't have a super deep connection there. I find it very, very believable that race could present a challenge for the NDP in New Brunswick.
Right.
At the same time, I'm not necessarily sure that's what motivated this change of the 5 that actually did change, or the 9 that actually did change.
Nine-ish. We still don't have a final number.
Yeah. I think the organizational challenges and the problems with the provincial party are the more likely explanation, but like I said, it would not surprise me at all to see that was a factor.
Yeah, I think it's certainly driving the conscious decision making, but I think it's we can take away a couple different things from the story. One is that the NDP has their work cut out for them, and one is that I think we all have our work cut out from us to make this conversation, somehow make it possible to, if we need to have that conversation, to talk about it and to make it clear that it's okay to be anyone from anywhere, and you can be Canadian and you can be a leader in our politics. And this remains a challenge for Jagmeet Singh, but I think it may be still an opportunity because it allows himself, and we saw actually another incident this past week where Singh's brother responded to racist comments directly and quite eloquently. So it gives them, Singh and those around him, the opportunity to rise above and to make very strong claims to humanity and political effectiveness as a result, that they can stand for a particular experience of being Canadian that can resonate, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So today was, I think, kind of the other big shoe to drop on this story. As we've hinted at several times throughout this segment, it was revealed today that a bunch of the people might not have actually gone over to the Green Party. So when reporters started following up, five of them people, and potentially more, said, no, I'm not joining the Green Party here, which has just led to a whole bunch of confusion. And it looks sloppy on the CBC's part for running the story of the 14 names and not verifying that. And then the two parties jumping on things without also having that verified. And as a follow-up, Elizabeth May has, since this being revealed, accused the NDP operatives of strong-arming those people away from the Green Party.
Mm-hmm. So we have possible backroom politics. We have certifiable accusations of backroom politics being leveled. So it's going on. It's going a bit negative, and I think it just underscores the stakes involved here. And I remain curious to find out how many New Brunswick candidates actually have left the NDP, how many are sticking around, and as a secondary question, I suppose, what happened between Tuesday and the last 24 hours or so, to whether minds were changed or whether it was misreporting and whether it's a combination of the two. We are in a fuzzy space where we need reactions right now. So we have had reactions from both leaders. People have been talking about it on TV. Here we are recording a podcast after the fact, and we still don't have the facts. And so this may be a case where everyone needs to chill out just a little bit until we can get everybody on the phone and figure it out, and then we can make our pronouncements about what this all means ultimately.
Yes, but since we can't actually record tomorrow or in another couple of days, let me ask you, what does this all mean?
Well, I'm glad you asked. It's a question I really want to answer right now. It is okay. Well, I mean, what are the takeaways? So we know that NDP is weakened in New Brunswick. That is definitively, I think we can say that that's the case. The Green Party is hungry, or as the kids would say, they're thirsty for this. They are willing to take any and all floor crossers right now. They're willing to look for signs of support and perhaps not ask too many questions or about where that support is coming from, or at least the questions come after.
They're playing the classic new, or I guess rising to relevance party game of, look, people are paying attention to us. We have momentum. That's all you need to care about. We're a real party. Please vote for us.
And we're seeing that in other ways, too. I mean, we're hearing about what Elizabeth May might do in the case of a minority government. And her answers matter. This is something we need to know. The margins may be so small that if the Greens pick up 3 seats, those 3 seats could matter. We don't know, and yet we do know that the battle for momentum, often too much is made of that. But if every vote is going to count in this election, we're going to see these two parties fight it out. And I mean, we don't want to totally downplay the idea that what happens on the part of the NDP or the Greens may affect the Liberals' fortunes, the Conservatives' fortunes, but there's this undeniable dynamic here where we have a struggle for the potential of being the country's third party. And there are a number of ways that could play out. One of the possibilities here is that at the end of this election, we're just a fragmented polity where we have 2 major parties and then we have what amount to 2 regional parties of very different descriptions, but where the NDP maintains strength in urban areas and the Green parties have a stronghold on Vancouver Island and maybe a couple other urban pockets of the country. There might be a few other surprises here and there, but neither one really has that strong claim to being a national third party, at least in this moment.
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with that. I don't think any of the parties came away looking good from this.
That's the other thing.
Yeah, like everyone kind of came off a little amateurish, I think.
Everyone came off defensive or thirsty.
So the real winner, I think, is Justin Trudeau in all of this.
It does seem like, again, it's a dead heat between the Conservatives and the Liberals, but the Liberals coming into this, the prelude to the elections in the spring, the Liberal Party just looked vulnerable, and yet none of the 3 parties, we're not saying much about the Conservatives right now, but none of these 3 potentially national alternatives has really capitalized on that moment and really made a move. The Liberals are continuing to hold at least the base they need to have a strong showing. And so, yeah, this every day that, every day we're not talking about SNC Lavalin is a good day for the Liberals in this cycle, I think.
Yeah. So why hasn't anyone been able to connect? I don't think Scheer's really been able to connect outside his base. Neither has Jagmeet Singh. And, well, Elizabeth May's been trying for well over a decade now and hasn't had any luck there.
Well, I mean, it's fair to say that the Greens are still, this is the summer of the Greens, and I think they've fallen back a bit from the high point of optimism shortly after the win in Nanaimo Ladysmith. But they're doing better, and I think that's undeniable. But it seems like, on the one hand, this country is having just a number of very different conversations. The conversations don't line up very well. So what you hear Conservatives talk about is just not the same thing as what Liberals talk about and Greens and NDP voters. So the conversation is fragmented, which means the electorate is fragmented. And so it's hard for any party to sort of make a sort of big tent kind of pitch where they're picking off people who may be inclined to vote for some other major party. So instead, we're just left with these 4 different parties, each of which has a base, and they're looking to maximize that base, and they're all limited by some factor or another. I think Liberals are hampered by their baggage. I think that's taken a toll. The Conservatives seem like they're unable to fully shake concerns around some social conservative views that we've had go-arounds around same-sex marriage, things that did not seem like they were going to matter when we were talking about the Liberal record, but now here they are. They're featuring into this debate again, and unless some party finds a convincing pitch to start to win over those other supporters, we're just going to be left with this trying to mobilize the base kind of election and narrowed horizons for all 4 parties. a narrowed horizon, except for the bit where the Greens have a widened, but
It's a wider but still narrow path because right now they're projected on the poll tracker to hit 4 seats in a range of, I think it's 1 to 8.
yeah. So it's Greens have a wider
Breakout.
scope.
They have a potential breakout to be more than the Elizabeth May party.
Yeah, and to splash put up double digits numbers in the votes, given how the votes are spread out, that it's hard for them to turn those, even a 10% plus result, into a meaningful share of seats, given that we continue to have first past the post system. So that, right, so it's expanded but still limited share of the vote. And with that optimism the Green Party has had, there's also increasing scrutiny. So we look at what Ms. May says about what she might do in a minority government, but we also ask other questions about that party. We scrutinize their other policies a little bit more, and so I think that is a part of the dynamic here as well. We just don't have any party where the Canadians are just being swept along by it. It feels a little bit more like trench warfare.
Well, let's move on to Twit-Tates, to one particular trench, which is located in Vancouver, Granville. So we have some riding level polling on this race here. Famously, Jody Wilson-Raybould is running as an independent there.
Sorry, who? Sorry, bad joke.
So Main Street released a poll earlier this week, and there's also been a couple other ones that have been coming out, but I want to focus on the Main Street one, because it basically shows a neck-and-neck race. So among all voters, we're looking at 28 for the Liberals and 26 for the Independent of JWR, with the other parties lagging quite far behind. So it's looking like a two-way race between the Liberals and Wilson-Raybould. Among decided voters, you see a similar sort of tie at 32 for the Liberals to 29. So overall, it's a pretty dead heat, especially when you get into how uncertain riding level polling is. It's really hard to say. So I guess the question is, can the ground game that an independent candidate put together compete in such a tight race against a fairly well-oiled Liberal machine?
Yeah, and I think the fact that Ms. Wilson-Raybould has such a strong profile nationally, she's part of the national conversation, obviously, that helps her out here. And the fact that she is quite popular within her riding. She maintains robust support among those who helped her win last time. I think a number of them at the riding level have transitioned with her to her independent run. So she is up against a well-oiled machine, but she herself has a significant political machine at her own disposal in the riding. And so it will be a close race. We interestingly don't see much in the way of support for the NDP. They've taken a real step back here from where they were in the last election. They were a strong second.
Well, not only a strong second, the wasn't fair vote. It was one of the strategic voting organizations. I cannot recall which one at the moment. They actually encouraged people to vote for the NDP in Vancouver Granville, which kind of A, tells you that strategic voting maybe isn't as all it's cracked up to be, and B, that they were strong presence in the riding, and now they're hovering around 7 or 8%, which I was actually a little surprised by. I thought with the Liberals and Jody Wilson-Raybould going at it, there might be space for the NDP if they could hold on to the support they had last time and maybe pick up 1 or 2. They'd be able to, ride up the middle between that fight, and it looks like that support's just collapsed.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple of things playing into that. One is at the riding level, they had a very strong candidate in 2015 in Myra Orrick, and so she's a well-known force in Vancouver politics, and so she could really mount a strong challenge to Ms. Wilson-Raybould and to the Conservatives. And so, 2015 seems a long time ago though, but that was a time of anybody but Harper kind of election, and so there was a lot of pressure to get a different result, and that focused on ridings like Vancouver Granville, and you're right, the attempt to guess how your riding is going to vote. That's a tricky game to play. But that's gone. So we're no longer in that era. So we don't have necessarily that outside support pushing the NDP forward. They have a young and enthusiastic candidate, but who doesn't have that same presence, I think it's fair to say, within the community. I think her name is Yvonne Hansen, is that right?
Yes.
And so that's another factor, a piece of this puzzle. And I think between people are looking in the riding to make their choice. The majority are looking between these two choices. It's a repeat for the Liberals or a repeat for Wilson-Raybould. In a sense, the incumbent is going to win. The incumbent is going to lose no matter what happens. So it's a fascinating race to watch.
So moving on to our next quick take, the appeal on Trans Mountain is going to go ahead as the court has decided to allow 6 of the 12 appeals to go forward.
And so that seems like something I would have expected coming into...
It was unlikely that the court was just going to say no appeals at all.
No, I mean, we need to, I think, to ensure the legitimacy of the process, there needs to be... some vetting of the work by the National Energy Board and then the decision by the government. We're going to find out basically whether the government did its homework with the federal court decision that blocked work on the pipeline previously. It basically laid out a roadmap how the government could deal with outstanding concerns and to take seriously its constitutional responsibilities to consult with First Nation groups over the issues that they are most concerned with, such as marine life and in the region. And so they don't. It's not the same thing as a veto. It's just the government was tasked with seriously grappling with those concerns and to do so in a good faith manner. And so now we get to see whether that is in fact the case. And this is a case I'll be watching with some interest because this is a subject I teach now and then as part of my course on Canadian federalism. And so if any students are listening, this is something that they may be interested in as well.
Yeah, so the Squamish Nation, among others, got leave to appeal this to the Federal Court of Appeals. Other parties that tried to appeal, such as the City of Vancouver, were denied leave. As was Eco Justice, the Rainforest Conservation Society, and Living Ocean Society. I think something that was a little unusual is the court actually laid out the reasons why they were granting leave. They often don't. In fact, it's typical practice not to. So that was a little unusual. They didn't say why they denied it to the other ones, so those parties are left in the dark a bit. But yeah, we'll be going forward, and we'll have the courts weigh in on whether the consultations were sufficient. And interestingly, a name that's very familiar for the people who've been following SNC-Lavalin comes up here, as the federal government's consultation effort was led by former Supreme Court Justice Frank Iacobucci.
Man, that guy gets around.
He's
doing work for this government.
Well, and SNC-Lavalin, because he was brought on by them, which had its own weird thing about he'd be representing both clients, but we touched on that in a previous episode, so I don't think we really need to go into it.
Right. And I look forward to the Supreme Court Justice retirement inquiry. No doubt it will be headed up by a retired Supreme Court Justice to give that imprimatur to the process. But we at some point we're going to have a conversation about just how much work do we want these retired Supreme Court Justices to be doing. I don't think they need the money. They seem like they're set up fairly well in life, but
we actually looked at this in a previous episode. They get 2/3 of their salary as a pension, and their salary is like middle six figures, so it's generous. I
think it's a way to keep busy, and it is a way to continue to provide service. If you want to take the positive view, they have unique expertise, so they have unique insights to provide. So there may well be a variety of opportunities that for them to make use of that, and then we should perhaps embrace that. But at the same time, and I guess, again, this is a bit of in some ways, a positive thing. When Supreme Court justices get involved in a process, they are imbuing their process with a legitimacy that effectively borrows from the legitimacy that Canadians invest in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court is widely regarded as the most trustworthy institution in the country. I think that's still true, and people ask that question in polls. And so when justices retire, they sort of keep some of that aura and they take it with them. And what we really don't want to do is to have a case where retired Supreme Court justices, they may be doing it out of a sense of service. I'm not going to start speculating on motives, but their involvement can lend that kind of legitimacy to processes. That,
yeah, it does. It's starting to feel like a legitimacy for hire thing.
Yeah,
which probably isn't intentional for the most part, although maybe a couple of governments kind of, but it's definitely, I think, getting to the point where Canada needs to have a solid conversation about this. And
it's the cumulative effect, and it's also the sort of what we also don't want is this to become like a shortcut where rather than questioning, is this a legitimate process? Is the process itself what we're putting our trust in? It's, well, this person with that authority, with that aura of legitimacy is involved, so it must be fine. We don't want to be finding ourselves repeatedly in that situation. We want to trust our institutions because they themselves are trustworthy.
And moving on to our final story, the taxis are challenging the Passenger Transportation Board's decision that we talked about last week. So they've given notice that they're going to be filing a court challenge with the Supreme Court of BC to attempt to quash the rules introduced last week. And it's interesting to watch. I think for the most part, the rules were generally considered pretty decent, but it did also have...
pretty decent and widely reviled.
I think it was a mixed bag, but like...
Well, no, those are two different things. You can have regulations that are reasonably moderate and based on sort of a best attempt to reconcile very different entrenched interests, and also you can have a lot of upset in the
particularly from those entrenched interests, as we're seeing here. So I think the thing that stood out the most was caps on number of vehicles in the fleet in different operating areas. And both were, I think, a little more generous to the ride-hailing companies than to taxis.
Well, right. So we have this two separate regulatory frameworks being stood up. They're cars that move people from one location to another, and yet that's where the similarity ends. You have, on the taxi side, the government is maintaining these municipal regions. So there are Vancouver taxis and Richmond taxis cannot go into Vancouver and pick up passengers. But the ride-hailing cars are going to have a single large region, I think metro-wide. And
Metro, Fraser Valley, and all the way up to Squamish. There's
so
5 of them in the province.
More than Metro.
They're big.
Right, so they're big, and a number of the taxi cab companies, although not all of them, feel like if the ride-hailing companies are going to have that kind of freedom, then the taxi companies should have increased freedom to roam as well, and so that's one issue.
It's not entirely clear if they want expanded rules in this challenge, or if they want to bring the ride-hailing companies down to where they are.
Right, and I think they may be challenging the overall legitimacy of the process, and I wouldn't put too much stock in the court being the place where this is finally resolved. I think the court may choose to weigh in, but this is ultimately a political decision, I think.
I don't know the specific provincial legislation that empowers the Passenger Transportation Board, but I don't know if there's like a provision that allows this challenge that would, give a lot of credence to this challenge, but...
Well, it is a quasi-judicial tribunal, so...
Yeah, you can argue on fairness grounds, and was the process good? But if the outcome is the thing they're really upset about, it's hard to... I'm not sure there's necessarily the tool in the legislation to challenge a process or a outcome rather than a process issue.
And I haven't done a fine reading of the legalities, but it strikes me as this is a political question. The government has given it to this arm's length body to consider, and it remains within the government's power to basically blow that up and to take control of this process if they want to. It's their legislation; they could change it.
And there are members of the government that aren't happy. Claire Trevina, the transportation minister, wrote to the board saying, I'm not really happy with this. This isn't a direction to do anything, but this isn't great.
And that shows the government has the sense that this is a political issue. I mean, they made a commitment to bring in ride-hailing, but then given the existence of this passenger transportation board, they didn't have fine-grained control over what form that ultimately
Which
took.
is probably a good thing.
Generally, it's a good thing, but it is a good thing, but there's a question of accountability here. The government is ultimately going to be accountable for what this arm's length body decides. And so now we see the government caught in that bind where you don't totally like what your arm's length body came up with. You are facing some political backlash.
The taxi industry is fairly politically connected.
Yeah.
So it's,
and
which is one of the main reasons I think having it separated out was a good thing in this case. But yeah, it's definitely creating a fair bit of political blowback, particularly from that interest group that would like to retain their favorable regulations for themselves.
And there are other concerns as well beyond the taxi companies. So by not capping the number of cars that are Uber or Lyft or whoever comes into the market is able to put on the roads, there's a potential that this could considerably increase congestion in the city. It seems like Vancouver area mayors that is something they're keeping an eye on and something they may be concerned about. And the Transportation Board said that they were going to keep an eye on it, and they may later reduce the number of cars, but it's often more difficult to, or at least more politically painful to take something away once you've given it than to just not give it out in the first place. So they are potentially creating a problem down the road for themselves and then by extension this government. So this is a story. The legal case is something I'll watch and I'll have to read up on a little bit more to give better answers about where it could go, but it is, I think, at base, this larger political story we need to keep an eye
on. So before we close out, Stewart, thanks for joining me and filling in for Ian. Do you let our listeners know where to find you?
Well, you can find me at any one of 3 campuses at Simon Fraser University. I'm teaching one course at downtown, one course in Burnaby, one course in Surrey. But perhaps more conveniently, they can find me on Twitter at Stewart Prest, and I continue to spend entirely too much time on there.
Well, thanks for joining me. And that has been Politicos. Find links to everything we talked about at politicos.ca. If you're a first-time listener, make sure to subscribe and let us know what you think. Support the show and get access to our exclusive Slack channel at patreon.com/politicos. If you have ideas for the show, feel free to send them to us. Our intro music credit is Beautiful British Columbia by Shushna Plotnikov. Thanks for listening.